Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 26 of Thompson and Other Disappointments. My guest tonight works in health technology, and that's an area of tech that I've never personally gained any exposure to. It's sort of seen as another world, I think, to software engineers, developers who work in, say, fintech or broadcast technology. It's always kind of over there, and we get calls about maybe working in this industry, but I have no idea what goes on there. So I thought, who can educate me on that? Who can talk to me about some of the weird and wonderful initiatives and projects that are going on out there? Everything from like Elon Musk's brain chips to, I don't know, what weird and wonderful add-ons and like biotech things are we going to end up with in the next like 5, 10, 15, 20 years? So I'm a blank canvas tonight, and joining me to help paint on me, that's a really weird intro, is Mr. Trilly Chatterjee. So please welcome Trilly Chatterjee to the show. How's it going?
Hi, Aid. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, painting on you. That's what an opener. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that justice.
You know,
Let's get out my canvas and brushes.
as I was saying that, I was thinking, oh man, you're partridging so hard. We're gonna go down a
Not a bad
partridge hole.
start.
Yeah. I am a blank canvas, and I just want you to paint on me. So you should take strength in the fact that that is both the weirdest and like the intro that I'm most proud of now.
Yeah, no. I think you could. I get that. I think you should put that on the highlights reel for sure.
Sure.
But yeah. I thank you very much for having me on. I'm delighted to be able to speculate wildly about the future of technology in a way that will probably leave me feeling slightly out of my depth throughout. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, I'm super super curious and just sort of keen and hungry to find out what's going on out there in health tech, because you I suppose it's like anything. When you work in technology, you get in a bubble and an echo chamber, where, like, for example, I do web development, and all day every day I'm following web developers on Twitter, and the people that I work with are sharing web development articles and stuff. And then there's this whole other universe of things out there, and the most I ever gain exposure to it is the odd headline when something like that Elon Musk brain chip. What's it? I keep calling it brain chip. It's Neuralink, right?
I think in Neuralink, yeah,
Yeah.
Neuralink is the name. I think.
And it sounds exciting, right? It gets me sort of G'd up. I'm like, wow, we've really come a long way. But I know nothing about the specifics of it, and indeed like how realistic it is, because for all I know, it could just be this sort of deluded billionaire up on a stage going, yeah, we're going to turn everyone, we're going to make people who haven't walked for 20 years walk again, and it sounds like, holy shit, this guy's really but is it, well, actually, before we get into like Elon Musk, let's give people a little bit of an introduction to you and like your background. So you work in health tech, but tell us specifically what you do, Trilly.
So I'm what's known as a product manager. So I'm a senior product manager in NHS Digital. I work currently in a program called NHS Pathways. That is what we'd call the clinical decision support system. Effectively, the big kind of really sophisticated, really complex decision tree that underpins 111 and 999. Some 999 services. So it's the thing that when you call up 111 or some 999 services, the call operators will be using to understand what questions they should ask you, and what to do on the basis of that eventually leads you to an outcome, like maybe getting an ambulance or going to being told to go to a service. So that's something I've moved on to recently, but I've worked at NHS Digital for about 5 years. I spent most of that time on the NHS website, and over the last year, obviously, our department has been doing tons and tons of work to support the coronavirus response. I've managed to be on some of that work, and we're coming into kind of obviously this next phase with vaccination rollout, but we're supporting work all over the system.
Which side of this are you, like, in terms of glasses half full, glasses half empty? When the coronavirus hit, were you like, thank God I work in health tech, this is so exciting and I really feel like I'm going to make a difference? Or were you, oh fuck, I should have worked for, like, in fintech? I should have, like, this is a huge mistake.
Yeah, weirdly, yeah, I think I mean, obviously, it's like I have some very particular memories also of moments throughout the course of this pandemic. We the first time that myself and my colleagues, Boris goes up on I should say the Prime Minister,
Yeah,
with,
yeah, yeah.
with due respect, goes up on national television and said NHS.UK/coronavirus, and I know that a ton of my colleagues, I've worked with for years, have worked on that and got that there in front of kind of where it needs to be. So, and that's just one example. Like there's obviously work going on across the department that supported all forms of the response. So things from analysing the data to understand who might be more at risk from coronavirus, delivering lots of different kind of initiatives, public information that's constantly needing to be updated. The example that I meant, NHS Pathways. So that obviously had to start accounting for a new medical condition that was, across the world. So, a new virus, and responding to that need so that people know where to go, and staff know where to direct people. So there's lots. It's kind of it's an invisible infrastructure, but it obviously, because it's digital, it's technology, it's IT, it's everywhere without necessarily being visible to people how it's implemented.
It sounds like it was sort of quite rewarding, quite like fast paced, and
definitely,
yeah.
it definitely has been that. I think that there was obviously, there's a point in the winter, in the second wave, I think, that we all kind of saw coming, and all knew that there would be a point before it and there would be a point at the other side of it, and it was kind of about getting through it, no matter what you were working on. And I think that my own experience of it has been coming out of the other side of that kind of March, April, there's a kind of a breathing outside. Obviously things continue to happen, but that's a point at which you can start reflecting on what has just happened and what's coming next. You can kind of breathe again. And I definitely felt that sigh, throughout the system to a certain extent.
Yeah, it must be hectic as fuck. I mean, sometimes I think of the most chaotic, stressful days that I have when there's a risk that, I don't know, somebody's account may have been wiped, and this is prohibiting them from logging in and then trading again. And that feels like the end of the world when it's me that's on the line for it, right? Or when we're just fact finding, we're trying to work out what's gone wrong, like how is this person's account but that is small fry compared to like a pandemic response on a national/international scale, having to build the systems and applications around that to support that, and to know that you're making a difference and that the decisions that you make are going to have real world effects. Whereas, I'm not diminishing the seriousness of somebody losing like $5,000 on a trade or whatever, but it's not the same, is it?
Definitely everybody who works here has like a phenomenal awareness of the sense of purpose of and the place that we hold within the system, and the work that that we support across the system being of like vital importance, I think. But it doesn't stop it kind of being work that we can also kind of be excited about, and also kind of also feels like work sometimes in the ways that that we don't all like but I think I personally, speaking for myself, it's been a major motivator in me kind of coming here and staying here, in terms of like just the range of things that we've got to do. For the last 5 years have been in various parts of the department, and all of us are trying to like evolve practice effectively, up skills so that we're able to do more and better. And that's kind of, that's cultural work as well as it is, technical everyday work, and it's reflection, and it's all of those kinds of things.
Sure.
And the longer I've been here, the more that kind of stuff has been happening. And so there's a heartening thing, like it's almost like, you get to feel like your efforts, are doing something that is magnified just by virtue of where you're making those efforts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
And that is kind of like a given that other, in other places you might not get that as a given, but it is, a perk and a privilege of the job. Fantastically so.
Did you always want to get into health tech? Was that?
Not specifically, no. Like my path into this was quite, as we find with many people, like this is a very like common story. Everybody's kind of got their own winding path through
Yeah.
careers. Mine came through like a series of coincidences. So when I went to university, I studied, my undergraduate was physics. I did all right in that. Like I ended up coming out of it saying like I found 25% of it fascinating and
Mm.
75% of it dull and not quite what I was hoping for. And I realized it was because I liked the idea of principles, like foundational principles. Physics is great for that.
Yeah.
But I also like human applications, and actually I found it really difficult to get super excited. Even though the awe of the universe is kind of contained within physics, I found it really difficult to get like excited about lasers and space. Like it was, I don't
Right.
know, it's weird. Like put them in sci-fi, I love them, but like studying them deeply wasn't my thing. And I
Yeah.
realized it was because I liked the human domain, and that's where like technology kind of came into it. And I ended up then doing like a postgrad degree in technological design. I was hoping to do research into games of all things because I was like that way inclined. But that never didn't pan out. I ended up working in market research call centers for a while,
Right.
and then I kind of just like this was around the time, just a couple of years after the economic crisis kind of kicked in, and I ended up knuckling down saying, right, I've got to get a job. I've got a job in the civil service in a department called the Office of the Public Guardian. So we're
Mm.
doing deputyship casework, which
Right.
was to do with when you lose mental capacity, what are the legal provisions for that? So who can manage your affairs? What are they obliged to do? What legal and if you don't go through that, you go through like a court process. So it was all of that kind of casework, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
But I was basically into the technological side of that, and I was learning like our systems needed upgrading. They were like decades old in some instances, or at least a decade old, and then we needed to think about how they needed to change for the department, and that basically kind of snowballed into this line of work over like a period of a few years.
Yeah.
I applied for the civil service like fast stream, which is the government grad scheme, ended up in their technology stream just as a kind of a wave of change was happening in technology that started around 2009-10,
Right.
where government started basically doing digital things differently, developing services in a way that's more in line with the practices of the 21st century that you'll be familiar with as a web developer, but broadly user-centered design, agile development, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and bringing our kind of the mission to bring our public services into that realm kind of began, spread through government, and that's basically created my career path ahead of me.
Wow. Yeah.
Is this kind of domain of public sector digital like services and
And
technology,
so,
and it's a great place to work. Like I enjoy it if you're driven by that kind of work. I think I feel phenomenally lucky actually.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think it's an interesting one because when I used to work in an investment bank years ago, and again, like when I went to work in a professional services firm, when we got, I'm an ex-recruiter, by the way. Before, like my own sort of series of coincidences was, I had, I sort of fell into a recruitment admin job when I first moved to London, and then I became a recruiter, and then I volunteered for a load of projecty stuff, and then with that I became a project consultant, and then a project coordinator, and then finally I retrained as a web developer when I was like 35. So it's like, again, like a series of sort of just, I don't know, fortunate moments where I just met the right people at the right time, and opportunities were presented to me. It's yeah.
if that wasn't really the reality for most people. And I think even more so with kind of the internet and everything that has changed. You
Yeah.
know, it is more kind of incremental, but also a bit more like this weird choose your own adventure of like purpose and work. I don't know what you want to call it,
Yeah.
but
I
it ends up being that way. And the more I meet people, the more I realize that that's the norm rather than the exception.
Yeah, well, don't say that
Really.
because I feel exceptional when
We're all allowed to feel
yeah, yeah.
exceptional. We all are exceptional. That's
But
the point.
it's like sometimes I think, like, is it just that I was presented these opportunities and therefore it's a kind of privilege? Like, should I really respect and acknowledge my privilege that I met, say, individual X, and they offered me the chance to retrain and like retain my salary that I already had, rather than having to drop out, go to university, accrue a mass of student debt and student loans. Like, not everyone could have done that. But then I also sort of arrogantly feel like if I hadn't have met that individual and I had known how, I'm going to sound like such an asshole now, but if I'd known how easy it is to pick up the basics, the fundamentals of web development just through like YouTube tutorials and like and that sort of thing, I think I probably would have taught myself anyway. But if I'd never met that individual, I don't know, I couldn't guarantee that I would have.
It's interesting because also, like, in the span of time that you're talking about, the nature of the resources that you have in order to teach yourself has exponentially exploded, right? And the concept that you can teach yourself certain things, and that there are fewer barriers between human learning, at least if you have access to technology, that has kind of irrevocably now shaped how we think about these things. We're talking, you think about the things around remote work and the direction things have shifted because of the pandemic, but then now in the aftermath, what that kind of means for people and what that means, the term "the future of work" has become a massive cliche already, but it is an important thing. It's because it is such a massive thing. But what we see is just this, this range of options opening up and a granularity of options almost to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was we're already on a course to allow people to self-educate, and that is especially true of things like web development, and I would say back-end development as well. But I think I'm right in saying that typically if you're going to do like server-side stuff, you would probably get into web development first. I think it's quite rare that people would jump straight into like C# or something. Maybe I'm wrong. Might be talking out my bum. But
also, if the tools are the medium that you work in, then you have like first dibs, right? On things. So there may be those kind of biasing factors at play that I'm always like open-minded to kind of those kind of arguments around how the system behaves at scale that we could not conceive because we just don't see how systems work. But like little things magnifying themselves at scale because, I think about that kind of stuff all the time because it's kind of what we kind of do. It's get the opportunity to think at that scale quite a lot. But obviously, what web designs means in this context is quite interesting. It comes down to principles become important. Design principles become really important because of their ability to scale. When you talk of systems that we kind of work with and services that we work with.
So if you've been working in health tech for like 5 years, you must have seen some really weird and wonderful projects like that have arisen and been discussed. And like I mentioned earlier about, typically this sort of stuff, the exposure that I get to health tech is when something makes it onto the Y Combinator page, or when it makes its way onto the Sky News Tech News bit, which invariably is stuff like the Neuralink shit, right? But you must have heard of weird and wonderful projects going around, like in the NHS. Is there anything that you can discuss, or are you sort of prohibited from talking about them? Or was there anything that made you go, "Whoa, that sounds gnarly"?
And not gnarly. I don't know if I have any awareness of things that I would consider gnarly. I think I can answer your question and also not answer your question. So I know that I've been involved in things that are remarkably kind of significant, though I probably can't really go into lots of detail about them. But one of the things that the last project that I worked on before I worked here was the kind of COVID implementation. So I don't know if you heard about Oxford University did some research and it developed an algorithm which allowed us to understand who would be most vulnerable from COVID, at least based on the analysis that they had done.
Oh, really?
And so that was in February. That led to a bunch of people being added to what was the shielded patient list. And as a result of that, kind of, if they needed to be kind of on top of prioritization for vaccines.
Yeah.
So
what was I don't know if you're at liberty to say, but have they revealed what these defining factors / variables are?
Yeah. it's published, it's available.
Okay.
So what I actually did was make a service available to clinicians
Mm.
that they could use to kind of use the kind of algorithm on the individual kind of patients. But it's all there. It's all publicly kind of available on the NHS Digital website. If you want to learn more about it, obviously it's all there and accessible. But yeah, it's so like I guess my awareness of opportunities kind of beyond that. I guess the thing that I'm more aware of and the thing I think more about, and this is part of my role at NHS Digital, is I'm a practice lead for product management. So I think a lot about kind of practice, like how we do things, basically, like practice of web development and of I guess you can call it R&D for health technology and services, basically. And yeah, that's so. I think a lot about how do you make the best design decisions when you have like complex health domains that require a multiplicity of expertise in order to understand, and you need to work out what the problems are that you need to solve, and then design technology. If you find that it's viable, or feasible, design technology to meet those needs. And that's a kind of a broad, that's a thing that's a set of skills or a set of ideas that can be applied to a lot of different problems. And that's why I'm excited about it. So I don't, there are specific technological applications, but all of those technological applications fundamentally need human organizations to kind of work at in an optimal kind of way to get the best results. And that's the kind of stuff that I think about more and I'm more kind of engaged with. Obviously, specific things when they become relevant, but yeah.
So there's
that's
been,
more
like, just to be super clear, there's not been any projects that have like flown their way across your inbox where it's like, this is called Project Falcon, and then you read the synopsis of the project and it says like, this is what we're researching at the moment, is to allow a guy who's cut his own dick off to grow another dick. Like,
I haven't have I heard of technology that is essentially kind of like sci-fi in nature? Like no, not unfortunately, no. Yeah, no, I haven't got. I've got stuff that's impressive.
How am I going to grow this dick back?
Well, I don't know how you got it chopped off in the first place. Like you need to be more careful with dick, I think.
Yeah, clearly.
You need to just be careful how you feel that.
Like it sort of amazes me but depresses me as well, like that. So you could work in health tech but there's nothing like really sci-fi happening, because it's
I mean I think I'm probably being deliberately boring, but I think yeah, I think when like working in health for me is I think really about the potential of being able to kind of deliver like improvements to the system, like that idea of like all of this information technology. It doesn't exist in a bubble. Everything kind of has a purpose, and it's the process of helping people work through what that purpose is and what it ought to be, and basically kind of running R&D on lots of those different things. But the problems themselves, they can be quite, they can range from being quite, so lots of stuff we do is about like what are the right words to use to help someone through this particular set of circumstances. So if the circumstance of having a particular condition, like, I don't know, diabetes, or something a little bit more urgent where you're trying to work out, like, what does this rash mean? Like all of those things, and really thinking through that process and understanding, like, when this happens to you, where are you likely to go and why? What are your concerns likely to be? What, if it's, things, and there are, there's a huge range of different conditions, and being able to kind of tailor those things to make your experience of life better if you encounter that thing.
Yeah. I get it.
That I think is where so it doesn't have to be remarkably kind of whizzy lightsabery tech.
Yeah.
To have like an excitement and a significance to it.
Yeah, like a real world like positive output, basically.
Yeah,
that's
fundamentally, yeah. That's
cool.
I mean, because it's like you could, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you can measure that in lives.
Yeah.
So that is I think something that we're all aware of, and if we're lucky enough to do something that
Yeah.
contributes. I think we feel like very happy about it.
Yeah, I get that. Let's skip forward to sort of futurism to some extent. So, I've touched on this a couple of times now with the Neuralink chip. Now, when I watch press releases or like press conferences and then read the press releases about these products, like to me they sort of blow my mind. I'm like, how are we in the future? Like now, like this is amazing. But there's a cold-hearted cynic part of me that's like, no fucking way is this gonna work. Like I can see this a mile off. Like he's gonna find some guy who's on death row that's going to agree to do it, and then they're going to put the chip in his head and something horrible will happen, or he'll just have a seizure and die, and then that'll be it. It'll be like pushed back. Like I just can't see it getting over the line and being this fantastic thing that we're all putting in our heads in 5 years time, he reckoned. But that's just me. That's me, a humble web developer with a cynical attitude. You work in health tech. What's your take on those sorts of products when you see them being hyped? Do you think that's realistic?
Yes. I mean, with Neuralink particularly, I mean, I won't claim to be well informed about it, but obviously I know Elon Musk as a figure in our culture. And for me, it's kind of, I guess, what's the right question to ask about technology like that? Is it, will we all have these chips in our head in 10 years' time? Or is it more fundamentally, why would you want to have that chip in the first place? What does it enable for you? What need does it fundamentally meet? And I think, there's absolutely nothing wrong with like technological capability being developed almost without necessarily a full because you get then general purpose technology, so you then get things like AI, which is, in its applications potentially remarkably general purpose because of the problem that it addresses and the way it addresses it. So when I see something like Neuralink, I'm like, okay, brain computer interfaces, interesting. What I'm having, I guess I'm having trouble imagining it, but we are starting to see, degrees of control. I think to various extents over the last decade, I think we've seen a lot more of those things. But Neuralink is promising a particular, I guess, speed, fidelity of kind of interaction between the brain and computers.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely feasible that we'll have working applications that will be marketed. I'd be interested to see, the gap for me is the kind of the human gap of like, what is the process of getting one of these things? How does it feel? How does it feel as an experience to the person? Those are those. What is it enabled that they can't do? Is like, all right, can they think their blinds open? And what is it doing for them in their lives? So those are the questions that I have about Neuralink that I don't have answers for that would allow me to gauge. Technologically, it may well be possible within the timescales that Elon Musk. I don't really know because these things are sometimes exponential in the way that they develop. I certainly know that's probably more the case for AI applications. But what I want to see is when human beings use this, like what is the motivation for them, like and does it what is it enable for them?
Yeah, the way that he framed it in the YouTube stuff that I watched about it was that this was going to be used to help like paraplegics regain control of their limbs. And even that alone, I was like, well, that's fucking incredible. Because if you've ever met anyone who's lost or is losing control of, and can't walk anymore or do anything for themselves, the idea that they might be able to do this in 5 years, like that, just to have that hope there is a gift in itself, I think. So the prospect, just the outside chance, let's say it's 5% or 10% that he can get this over the line, I think is incredible.
Yeah,
but where
sure.
I get slightly unnervy is, I suspect, what you were alluding to before, which is like, okay, look, if you connect your Neuralink to your electric blinds and you all of your Internet of Things, great, okay, like on the face of it, that's probably going to make your life easier, right? You walk in the room, you think about the blinds, and they do whatever it is that they do. But then you got to look at like file transfers. Like if you look at your wife or your girlfriend and then you you choose the wrong file, or your mother-in-law, like you choose the wrong file and accidentally send the photo to your mother-in-law that you meant to send to your wife earlier, and it's a picture of you with your balls out. Like, so do you know what I mean? Like, it seems like an edge case, and maybe they shouldn't halt research on it based on the silly shit I might do after a couple of beers. But it's like, it is there. Like, if you're connected, and I'm going to assume that Neuralinks can connect to each other, and therefore you could do a file transfer. And then there's the whole, like, the question of like hacking. Like, you could hack someone's phone, so why would you not be able to hack their and if you hack their Neuralink, do you just get like all their data, or can you fucking control their hands and make them punch themselves in the face? These are questions I don't have the answers to, Trilly.
Well, no, I can't claim to have them either, but I guess, yeah, like you're asking all kinds of specific questions about the technology there, and I think, and you know, so there's a question in there about, you know, what's the directionality of control. You know, I would work on the assumption that maybe it's one way, you think out, it doesn't necessarily, you know, return its impulses back in, but then again, I guess that's disputable. You know, my intuition is that, yeah, this will be something that is about kind of interfacing, and that the thing, you know, the signals coming back in might be a bigger challenge, given what, you know, we still have large, you know, we're learning more and more all the time, but the specifics of how you kind of translate input back in, I think, is probably a harder set of problems. But yeah, I'm happy to be informed otherwise. But yeah, sorry, I forgot what your specific question was, or whether you wanted me to just riff.
Do you know what? I don't think I asked a specific question. I was just thinking out loud.
Yeah, the thing about I get less excited, I guess, less excited and less worried about Neuralink technology than I do about AI. But again, that's probably something that is affected as much by that being part of the zeitgeist right now as well.
Do you think
machines and data that are kind of employed in all of, which I think will be employed like much more, you know, much more wide scale across a lot of different, you know, not even just in one, you know, particular area or domain of profession, but actually across a wide range of them, and therefore have interesting but also perhaps worrying combinatorial possibilities that we need to also think through as part of those design processes that I was talking to you about earlier. Like, there were some big questions emerging for which we need practice to kind of like pretty quickly,
right?
Because it's stuff that's possible with technology that we have today, and is really about, you know, how fast that finds application in different domains. So we kind of need to kind of make a jump. And, you know, so I was reading recently.
Do you mean like with regards to AI, like implementation of AI into?
That's certainly, I think, one of the major themes that's coming on at the minute. So I was reading, kind of in preparation for this episode, I was reading a report done for the government a couple of years ago by an academic called Eric Topol, and it was basically about like healthcare technology and the future of it and the opportunities that exist. And it envisions a future in which, you know, the clinical profession changes and becomes more oriented toward this kind of the kind of clinician that can use AI as a supporting tool and has that as a continued kind of reference. And Topol's kind of articulation of this is about you know, how that AI presence being, you know, or say a set of capabilities, you know, is a new skills requirement for clinicians, but also allows clinical clinicians to work in a different way, where they become more focused on, you know, patient care and delivering care. But also it requires them to be then more data literate and more literate with these systems and the vagaries of them, and, you know, the limitations of them as well, to make those kinds of judgments. But that's not the only future that's possible, because we're at this, you know, disjuncture, and a lot of the decisions about how this is practiced, how, you know, and how teams come together, how these systems are designed. You know, obviously lots of ethical implications, obviously lots of those things, lots of implications about data, all those kinds of things. need to be considered and integrated into practice for this to deliver the results that we need it to deliver.
It's quite a heady responsibility, isn't it? When you like, I was watching a documentary the other day about financialization, and the documentary maker was saying that the 2008 crash and the current appetite for quantitative easing within the city can actually be harked back to Bill Clinton deregulating in '92, I think it was, and how like now they had interviewed Bill Clinton, and he said it was his biggest regret of his presidency that he had taken that decision at the time, but it seemed like the right thing to do for the economy at that time. I think I'm understanding that correctly from the shit that I saw the other day. But it seems like there's a sort of parallel there now with AI, in that, you know, we know that this technology is here. We know that it's going to improve our lives massively over the next 5, 10, 20 years. But there's a huge responsibility on people who do implement it into health tech or government or finance, that they do it in a way that is not going to have similar kind of repercussions further down the line, the likes of which we can't possibly foresee at this stage. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is why I think, you know, the focus on practice that I was talking about is the thing that excites me, because if there are general broad principles that you can apply in order to make make those processes more successful, or more likely to succeed, or more likely to avoid risk and harm, that's the stuff that's going to allow us to land these things in a way that has the maximum benefit and the minimum downside. And that's kind of what we want. And I think that's why as I've kind of evolved through working in this industry and kind of developed practice and thought about it and talked to a lot of different people about it, I do increasingly have a sense that there are general principles of practice. That I'm not saying they're easy to implement. Some of them are actually quite hard, but there is a way that you can think about collaboration, decision making, bringing people together in these complex domains, but also respecting the multiplicity of expertise and experience that is required in order to understand the context and understand then what technology can do for people in that context, and make all those kind of really, sometimes very consequential decisions about how things ought to be done. Run experiments, run trials, make from the most kind of granular thing, from like what words should you use, to understanding the architecture of the whole scenario in which an individual will have a decision made about their life by these technologies, perhaps in coherence with another professional, or a multiplicity of professionals. A lot of stuff that we do is about different groups of people with different functional responsibilities using the same tool, and what are their different needs for information. And those are things that it's difficult to make, to have confidence in the decisions that you're making without understanding the context. And I think that that's something that excites me about the things that I'm talking about, is that it's kind of the evolution of the practice of software development to where we didn't have methods and process, or did not say didn't have, but didn't have, in matching the sophistication of the technologies that we have to a certain extent, to ask these questions or answer them effectively. Whereas like increasingly now we do, and it's actually a question of, are these skills and disciplines and methods in the places where technology is implemented? That to me is like the big question, right? Or one of the big questions.
Yeah, like one of the things you touched on a second ago is quite interesting to me, in terms of like running trials where you're using, say, AI within it doesn't have to be health tech, like any industry. And I'm midway through reading Charles Arthur's new book at the moment called Social Warming, and he gives a fairly like in-depth account of what's gone wrong with social media apps, and specifically around like algorithms within the Facebook and Twitter worlds, where they would, it's not that they set out to radicalize your uncle into becoming a St. George's flag waving racist, like Brexit supporter, anti-vax guy. It's actually that the algorithm is just feeding him the things that it has worked out somebody like him is more likely to continue clicking on. And so it's, as far as it's concerned, it's doing good because he's spending more and more time on it. And I suppose, just going back to what you were saying, it's going to be the same with AI cross industry, where when we start implementing these new ways of working, we're going to have to run these sorts of trials in a way that these apps did not. They're going to have to say, right, okay, what happens when this AI talks to this ML app, and then both of them work in tandem, and then all of that information goes off into this database, and then like what is the chain of events that takes place? There's going to have to be so much testing, and I suppose to some extent that will slow down the progress, and therefore you'll have to sort of weight up that sluggishness with the overall cost benefit of using AI.
Yeah. So this is something that the balance of this is very, very tied in with the specifics of the application. It's kind of like, right. Or at least my understanding is that. So, like, I know in the project, in the Q-COVID project that I was just on, the data literacy was critical. Like, a lot of the issues kind of around data require expertise to understand boundaries, limits, parameters, to also understand legal implications and all of those things, and how all of those things kind of interact, duties, public duties, all of those kinds of things are get kind of swirled into this mix around a particular application of you talked about AI. We're not talking about an AI application here. We're talking about just an algorithm, not necessarily machine learning. But those principles come kind of into play. But I think it kind of something in the Topol report that I read that I remember was like, it said something like in 20 years, 90% of the NHS jobs will require some element of digital skill, and all staff will need a degree of like digital and genomics literacy. So I haven't even gotten to genomics. I've not worked on something where genomics literacy is pertinent directly. But think about what that means in terms of a change of the way we think about these professions and what they fundamentally do. I think there's a lot of potential for kind of evolution, but being in the foothills of this change, it's difficult now to imagine what that looks like in terms of day-to-day care. But it will be happening. It's like I say a lot of things, particularly because I work a lot in the changing of organizations, and that doesn't necessarily happen overnight, right? I said like the iceberg melting, which is an unfortunate analogy to be using at our times, but also quite apt for our times, I think. You don't necessarily see it move if you stare at it, but if you can't go and come back 2 weeks later, 2 months later, you kind of see the change. And I think it's going to be one of those shifts that happens, where we see more care being successfully trialed and successfully delivered using these methodologies, and practice kind of shifting over time. I think like a marker to watch out for is when educational institutions that deliver the training start really shifting their curricula and orienting specific targeted portions of time in, say, a medical medicine degree, nurses training, and any clinicians training. I watch those spaces with interest, because those are the places where you're going to start to see the shift in what the professions actually do.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's something to look out for sure. I'll be interested to see if education does move in a kind of more vocational way in the next few years, because sometimes I get into debates / arguments with my girlfriend about this, where I'm like, well, when our son gets to 18, would I encourage him to go to university if he wanted to go and study like social studies or something that wasn't vocational, or would I tell him to go to wherever his friends are going to uni and then actually just teach himself to code and like have a day, and then that way he can go there for the social aspect of it, but then he won't get lumbered with all of the debt afterwards,
That's interesting. That's an interesting. It's how long before that advice needs to be
he's 4
delivered.
He's 4 at the moment.
He's 4, right? Okay, so you got 14 years to work that one out. Then.
I mean, I've already said like he'll be working as assuming that programming is still a thing, because I don't know if you're familiar with like these no code solutions, but if they haven't written programs to write programs more so than they already have, then I'll just teach him to code so he can get involved in that.
I mean, it will increasingly become a skill. Like, obviously, I think we're in that phase now where people are talking about coding younger and younger and younger.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the Lego of a future generation. I don't know.
yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Well, it's not far off. Like, I mean, he's 4 at the moment, and then I was watching news stories about kids in China, like when they're about 5 or 6, they start doing like if else blocks, like moving little blocks of conditions and shit.
Stuff like thinking the basics of kind of algorithmic thinking.
Yeah,
Definitely, I think about that, things about critical thinking stuff as well. But at the same time, that let's not get too far
yeah, yeah.
But
So
yeah.
we've only got sort of a few minutes left, so I just want to touch on like the future and like what we think is coming down the line in like sort of 10, 15, 50 or 100 years, right? So here's where my head's at, and you can take this and run with it, or you can tell me that I'm just incredibly cynical and I need to cheer the fuck up. But I think the fear for some people, and by some people I basically mean me, is that in the future everyone will have like some form of Neuralink, or like whatever the actual product is that ends up being that, and there will be this sort of convergence of different technologies. So it won't just be a chip that goes into your brain that helps you walk again, or indeed does the file transfer stuff that I was talking about earlier. It will also include gaming. It will be like the then or modern equivalent of like VR. So it will sort of project images over your face. You'll be connected into a network. It would basically be like the Matrix, right? And as services and structures and public support, as all of these things begin to crumble, and I don't know, high streets and smaller businesses begin to fail because larger corporations don't pay as much tax and they corner the market of everything, then the tax money will start to dip and dip and dip, and then there won't be enough money to pay for things like this service or that support structure over there or this school. And so what you'll end up with is basically like a sort of Matrix thing where people's actual reality lives are incredibly depressing, and so they will choose to spend more and more of their life in this sort of digital world where they can choose how they look, who they fuck, what drugs they can take, where they're living. You're not stuck in some horrible like little dingy flat in I was going to say Clapham, but Clapham's actually quite nice. But yeah, like you're not like
dingy flat in Clapham might look good for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, I hope I haven't lost any listeners in Clapham, but basically yeah, people will have a choice. They can either live their reality lives in a dingy flat somewhere, or they can just plug in and then suddenly they're a rock star, like they are, like exactly like the Matrix. I can definitely see something like that happening. Where do you sit on that sort of like dystopia utopia scale? Do you think I'm a manic depressive, or do you think like does that stuff worry you?
Yeah, I also think that your scenario is basically, I haven't either seen the film or read the book, but that's basically the Ready Player One scenario, is that you've described, isn't it? Is
I'm
that
not
basically
familiar with Ready Player One?
Ready Player One? I think it's certainly, it was a book, I think, and then it recently became a film, but it's basically about that scenario. The world is in a dystopic future, but everyone can connect into this virtual world called the Oasis, and they can be any character from any part of pop culture that has ever existed ever.
Amazing. Sounds great.
And so you have like Duke Nukem against like Bugs Bunny, and it's this weird. Basically, it's like Fortnite, but like huger. Fortnite crossed with Grand Theft Auto, crossed with every major AAA title of the last 3 decades. And is that future appealing to us? Is that future just the gradual way in which things will tend? I think there are forces that pull us in those directions, right? But what I think about is like, what are the pulls toward it on an individual human level, and what are the kind of pulls away from it? And I think like the level of I'm not saying it's like it's not encountered. I think today you see people. In fact, actually, this is an interesting thing that this question has sparked. So, Bo Burnham's Inside.
Mm.
Have you had a discussion with anyone on this podcast about that?
No, not yet. I've not seen it myself, but everyone's raved about it.
Yeah, and it's fair. And it's fair to say it's one of those zeitgeisty things, and there are opinions on both sides about how worthy it is versus how popular it is, etc., etc. But I think the thing that it does is it captures like this moment, I think, that we are in now fully as a culture, which I will just call internet skepticism.
Right.
Right. We've had internet utopianism for a few decades, right? Which was like, oh, it's new. Think about the possibilities.
Yeah.
Oh, things are becoming real. Look what it's doing. And now we're like at the point which is like, oh crap! Like, what direction are we heading in?
Yeah.
What has this done to us? And what will it continue to do if we don't kind of wake up, fix up, and get our shit together?
Yeah.
Right. So I think Inside, and I feel, this is my take, the reason why it's so popular is it so encapsulates that sense in all of its individual parts. Whether you think they're great or they're clever or they're worthy or whatever, the whole thing, the whole hour and a half of it, manages to capture that shit, right, about the internet and about everything about it. Now we can argue about whether that's right or wrong, or whether it's overblown, or whether it's actually even a helpful thing to talk about. All of those things we can debate. But for me, that's the point. That's the Rubicon that we're at right now. And I think that may, as much as all of the pulls of the lure of shiny technology that distracts us, is pulling us in that direction. I think there's also this thing about, this is not. If I allow myself to be carried away with it, I don't think that this is a good thing. So we're all about, and I think again, the seismic shift in our ways of living and the interruption to life as we knew it, that I think the pandemic has created another space of reflection. And that obviously is the same thing that allowed Inside to be created, but it's where we are right now.
Yeah,
it is where we are now. I think it's going to be where we are for a few years to come. In various ways, it will evolve, but I think it's where we are right now. And so I won't say that future won't come to pass, but I think there are a lot of people, more people who are wary of that future now. Than maybe
having been starved of human contact and reality for. Well,
this is great. I would love to be sitting in a pub with having a fight with you right now. And I'll be honest with you. That is how I would rather be having this interaction. But we are blessed to be able to be having this interaction in this way. Anyway,
I have to remind myself in my lesser moments when I get frustrated by the pandemic. I think like, well, how lucky are we that this pandemic hit at the time that it did, and not like 1989, when it would have shut the whole fucking world down, and we would have waited like 10 or 15 years for the vaccines. And
how would this gone down in 95? Yeah, I think about that all the time. But also, you got to think about it. Would it have happened to the same extent and quite as fast? And there are all kinds of counterfactuals and weird ways you can think about that question. But certainly has occurred to me.
Yeah. Listen, man, I could chat all night, but I've got to go. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. And have you got any social media or anything that you want to plug or point?
I guess if you want to follow me and find out vague random things that are going on at NHSD and in the world of product management and user-centered design practice in the public sector, follow me. I'm on Twitter at Trillyc, TRILLYC.
Cool, man. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll catch up with you soon, no doubt.
Thank you very much, Ade. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.